God, there go I.
Right.
Thank you.
Doctor, one of the best or most proud accomplishments that I had while I served in the State Senate was to chair the Housing Committee. The housing advocates that work in Sacramento will tell you it was probably the best chair on supporting the issues to solve the homeless problem, to stop talking about it. We got to stop talking about it. Let's solve it. At least let's reduce the percentage. And we've got a NIMBY problem. We all know that. We do have to embrace them, not just as our neighbors, but as our community family. We have to embrace that. And the economic disparity that we've talked about throughout this discussion today clearly is a big issue. But I want to add one to it. I want to know who's really been fighting this fight. I fought the tobacco industry for the tobacco settlement dollars, and when Orange County was going to get a share of that, they were going to spend it on jail beds and debt retirement. I partnered with the Orange County physicians to stop them with Measure H that ordered Orange County to use that money, millions of dollars, on health and health care. And a significant amount of that went to treat the homeless so that they at least have better health care.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you.
Will you follow in the footsteps of your predecessor, Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, and sign Conyers H.R. 676 for improved Medicare for all?
Conyers.
H.R. 676 for improved Medicare for all.
Do any of our doctors in the room know exactly what improved Medicare for all, what that bill is? Could someone? I think we need to intelligence. Yes, Dr. Bill.
It would take what is currently Medicare, expand it to everybody in the country, like every other advanced country in the world already has.
I love it.
The answer is yes.
Lou?
The answer is yes, and I have to say that I'm proud of the state of California and what we did in the state of California. We're the first state, I believe, to implement the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. And you have to remember, Medicare took 60 years to get where it's at today. And I'm hopeful Washington will continue to work to make sure the Affordable Care Act covers many, many more individuals in our society. And while in Sacramento, we also work to make sure that private insurance companies cover things like mental health care and autism treatment. So the theme here is very simple. We need to move to a model where everybody is covered by health care. Those issues, for example, those things that are not covered by health care, women's contraceptives, mental health care, autism, those other issues must also fall under the umbrella of coverage. And I'm happy to say we're moving ahead in California with Obamacare, and I'm hoping we continue to implement in a way that covers everybody that needs to be covered with health care. Thank you.
Karina, great question. The answer is yes. Again, no surprise that we're all saying yes to that question. The issue, though, is who's been fighting this issue the longest. I have always, when I was a lawyer, when I was a senator, when I was CEO of the California Medical Association, I've advocated for universal health care. When bills were introduced every year in Sacramento, I voted yes, proudly. I'm one of the few Democrats that did that year after year after year. Because my fundamental belief is that as a society, an advanced society, we owe it to the great workers, the great hardworking families that make this nation great, that no matter what, they have access to a basic level of health care so they can take care of their health issues, their children's health issues, because that only makes them better at what they do in life, whether being with the family, productive on the job. It's critical. Some would argue this should be a constitutional right. And frankly, if our nation's going to be great, we've got to finally embrace the fact that we owe all a basic level of universal health care. Answer, yes.
When I was a high school student, it was Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez in 1996
that broke through the orange curtain and beat Bob Dornan, who inspired me to choose a life of public service. You remember that, right? And in 1998, it happened again, and we won again. You know, we've made great strides with Obamacare. 17 million more insured Americans. And that's slowing the growth of healthcare costs. John Conyers' H.R. 676 is one more step forward that we need to make, and absolutely, I will be there and I will champion that bill, Dr. Bill.
David?
I have one more. There's one more.
Can we ask you guys questions?
There is one more question on mine. Okay. After the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, and the U.S. Freedom Act, many of us Americans feel that we have been violated and deprived of our civil rights. What is your position? Have we traded in our personal civil liberties for this so-called security?
My next.
No, Jordan.
That's a very good question. I think that's the question that's front and center for our society as well. As we as a government, we as a people try to protect ourselves from random terrorist acts, and at the same time we fight for that which makes this country great, which is our privacy and our individual liberties. I think when you look at this issue, that the court system can play an important role, which is you can have a judge and arbiter determine what is essentially of national security and what is not. But the fact of the matter is, we are living in a very dangerous world where we need to continue to be vigilant. At the same time, you know what? I like my privacy, the very little that I have. So we have to make sure we do everything we can to respect that privacy as well.
You, Karina, you have asked one of the most important questions we face in society today. In 2003, I was proud to launch another investigation. That investigation was into the Bush administration's use of the National Guard to spy domestically, violating our privacy. I'd like to say I gave a copy to my son that I actually was in the Rolling Stone magazine as a result of that. Quite proud, I'll have you know. We are the ones, our investigation is the ones that put that on the front page of major newspapers around this country. Privacy is critical, whether invaded by major corporations or big government. But I didn't just touch the issue in 2003. I'm at the law school at UCI now, and we're about to launch the nation's first robust cybersecurity research institute. And under the leadership of Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, we're putting together a board that consists of some of the most ferocious advocates for privacy and some of the most ferocious advocates for security. Because the challenge for us is to find the right balance of those two. We need to be secure, and we need to have confidence in our privacy. It's a very complicated challenge, but we're tackling it through the UCI Law School. First in the nation. I've been living with this issue for a long time. There is a solution.
Thank you very much, then.
My parents, my dad, after 1975, after South Vietnam lost, was put under house arrest, and he lost his rights as a citizen for working with the Americans. That's why we came to this country. He was under surveillance. I am not going to stand for any government illegally surveilling citizens. That is wrong, and that needs to stop. You know, this is really an issue about government transparency. You know, we need government to be transparent, and that's where we need to go. You know, I understand that our government has needs to have national security top secret, diplomatic secrets. That's understandable. But spying on American citizens is not okay. We need to strengthen security. You know, those security breaches where our credit card information gets out there, those need to be strengthened, not spying on U.S. citizens.
We always need to make sure our freedoms are secure and our Bill of Rights is intact. First and foremost, that's the very bedrock of our nation and what the government promises all of its residents. And that's what you can get from me, a constant advocate on those counts. No government is perfect, but we strive to be. And the government did approve policies in the wake of 9/11 that do need to be reformed.
Yes.
We must make sure that privacy, which is a constitutional right, is always upheld. And we can do that while also making sure our national security is intact. And that is the thoughtful governing you will get from me as your congressional member.
Thank you all very much. That concludes all the panel questions. We will now go to the questions from the audience, and Donald, can you take a seat here, put the microphone down there, because I have to speak into the mic for our translator over here. We have time, for approximately 4 questions is all, because they have a 2-minute closing statement.
Okay. The first question I have is...
Okay, speak into the microphone.
All right. The first question I have that has come from the audience: were you in the private prison system?
This goes to Joe, start now. What was the question again?
Were you in the private prison system?
That one would be right?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And that's not just campaign rhetoric. I spoke loudly against a private prison system, just like I speak loudly against for-profit education system. There are certain basic things in our society that don't belong in a for-profit market context. They don't belong there. Fire, police, prison system, our education system. They belong in the hands of the people of this great state and of this great nation. It's not the place for for-profit environments. We all know when it comes to the choice between providing decent care and services, whether it's a prison or whatever the case may be, versus the profits, when they clash, the profits always win. That's not the right place for our prison system, our education system, or fire, or police, or those basic services that should be provided by our government entities.
Mr. Craig, thank you for the question. Private prisons are driven by profit, and that's one of the problems we see today with so many people rounded up, including our undocumented immigrant friends and neighbors. It is driving profit. How can we allow that to happen? We must stop the private prison industry. That is a part of the problem of the school-to-prison pipeline. We need to invest in education, not give these lobbyists in Washington what they want to support private prisons. We need to support our kids and invest in our kids and our public education system. Give teachers what teachers need to teach and making sure that our kids get a great education. Private prisons have already shown to be bad. You know, that's the real human cost. Everyone in here knows somebody that is a victim of for-profit prisons. We need to stop that.
Yeah.
We have to end the private prison paradigm because that system is what is infesting our ability and keeping us from reforming the prison population law enforcement issue. As long as we allow that, when are we ever going to get to reform and making sure that those who are convicted of nonviolent crimes due to drug offenses get the treatment they need rather than going to a cell in a for-profit prison? They all work together. It is all part of that school to prison pipeline that is just unconscionable. And if we end that pipeline at that point, that will help us in an adequate way, thoughtful, make sure that we reform the drug laws and invest in education the way we should be. Thank you.
Same answer from me, absolutely, there's no room in our society for for-profit prisons. Let's close them down, save the money, and do what needs to be done, which is start investing that money on diversion programs for our youth. Make sure, again, you provide those wraparound services. When you see our kids in elementary school with behavioral issues, you start to invest in making sure we understand what is going on with that child and keep that system going. I mentioned earlier today that a big challenge that our youth have is affording college. And I mentioned earlier as well that I went to college 40 years ago, it was for free. Today, our children can't afford to go to college. So let's, again, close down these private prisons and invest in our youth and make sure that the demand for prisons, period, private or public, is eliminated. Thank you.
The next question will commence with Bao, the mayor.
All right. The next question I have from the audience, what is your position on bringing justice and freedom to the Palestinian people?
Israel, like I said earlier, is one of our strongest allies in the region, and I support a two-state solution. Diplomacy is what America stands for, and that's the direction we need to go in.
We absolutely need a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. We have not been able to even get close to that since Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. We can do this. The president is working hard. Our leading Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, is committed to it. And once we have the implementation of a two-state solution, we will hopefully have peace in this region. And I hope and I pray every day that that will happen. Thank you.
All life is precious. Every life matters. Breaks my heart every time I pick up the newspaper, watch TV, and see lives being lost again in the Middle East. A conflict that has gone on for generations, for decades. We must create the incentive for all sides, all interested parties, to come to the table and come up with a solution. I support the president's role in mediating a solution that works for all sides. We can push as much as we want to push to get people to the table, but folks in that region have to want to have peace. And that's why I come back to what I said earlier, which is my number one priority is to make sure our children are protected out of harm's way and that we stand with our allies in the Middle East. Thank you.
Doctor, great question. It's one that's been haunting us as a world for a long time. The answer is, like many of our issues today, the four candidates sitting up here all tend to agree. I too support the two-state solution. I do agree that we need to ensure that we have, as President Carter did in the late 70s and other presidents since, including President Obama, we have a significant role in bringing peace there between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But it is tragic every time we see on TV, whether it be Israeli children who are killed in a rocket attack or Palestinian children in a responsive attack. But they do have to want it themselves. So there is a role for us. It's going to be slow. We have to be patient. But we have to ensure that we have a two-state solution where both nations have the ability to live in peace. Something that has eluded the Middle East for centuries.
Thank you. The next question will commence with Jordan Brown, Councilman from Anaheim.
Okay. The next question from the audience.
Right in the mic a little bit more.
Okay.
Gotta hear you.
Next question from our audience. How can real change come about to diminish gun violence in this country?
Well, one of the first things we can do to diminish gun violence in this country is reenact the laws that have been allowed to expire, including the assault weapons ban. How many more children need to die before we finally reform our gun laws and make sure that those who are mentally ill are not able to harm others. How many more Sandy Hooks